until the objective is achieved. I thank you, Madam President.
I thank the representative of Algeria for their statement. I shall now put the draft resolution to the vote. Will those in favour of the draft resolution contained in document S/2024/312 please raise their hand? Okay, we've been recorded 12, right? Okay. Those against? Thank you. Abstentions? The draft resolution has not been adopted owing to, the result of the vote is as follows. 12 votes in favour, 1 vote against, 2 abstentions. The draft resolution has not been adopted owing to the negative vote of a permanent member of the Council. I now give the floor to those members of the Council who wish to make statements after the vote. I pass the floor to the representative of the Russian Federation.
Madam President, Madam President, Madam President, this day may go down in history as a day when, after 3/4 of a century, the international community at last made the right choice on the path towards correcting the many years of historical injustice done to Palestine and the legitimate aspirations of its heroic people. Because it was a simple question: are the Palestinians worthy of being part of the global family, fully participating in all of the decisions of international life? And a question that we have constantly answered with consent. And when Israel was welcomed into the UN, and when dozens of states also released from the colonial yoke were welcomed into the UN. However, our American colleagues believe differently. Having, for the 5th time since the beginning of the exacerbation in Gaza, their veto, they have once again demonstrated what they really think of the Palestinians. For Washington, they do not deserve to have their own state. They are only a barrier on the path towards realizing the interests of Israel. For that reason, the United States is ready to the last to turn a blind eye to the crimes of Israel against the civilians in Gaza, not noting the illegal settlement building activity in West Jerusalem on the West Bank. The aim is to break the Palestinians' will, to force them once and for all to submit to the occupying power, to turn them into servants and second-class persons, and perhaps to once and for all force them out of their native territory. That policy is only having the opposite impact. At present, an absolute majority of the global community supports Palestine's application to become a full member of the World Organization. The suffering of Palestinian civilians is resounding in the hearts and minds of millions of people around the world. In countries that supply weapons to West Jerusalem, there are louder and louder voices calling for those supplies to be banned. Today's use of the veto by the US delegation is a hopeless attempt to stop the inevitable course of history. The results of the vote, where Washington was practically in complete isolation, speak for themselves. With the most playing into the hands of the most irrational actions by their ally and reluctant to find just solutions on the basis of the existing international legal basis, is a direct path to the further sliding into the mire of war which could encompass the entire region. If the United States and Israel benefit from this, then it will only be in the short term. At the same time, Washington will once and for all remove itself from the list of peace-loving and respected states, having fully shared responsibility with its Israeli allies for the deaths of tens of thousands of Palestinian civilians. And that is not worthy of a great power, and history will not forgive you for that. We call on the United States to listen to the voice of reason, to think about the consequences of their decisions, and to immediately join in the efforts of the other members of the Security Council to establish an immediate ceasefire in Gaza. Thank you.
I thank the representative of the Russian Federation and pass the floor to the United States.
Thank you, Madam President. The United States has worked vigorously and with determination to support Palestinian statehood in the context of a comprehensive peace agreement that would permanently resolve the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Since the attacks of October 7, President Biden has been clear that sustainable peace in the region can only be achieved through a two-state solution, with Israel's security guaranteed. There is no other path that guarantees Israel's security and future as a democratic Jewish state. There is no other path that guarantees Palestinians can live in peace and with dignity in a state of their own. And there is no other path that leads to regional integration between Israel and all its Arab neighbors, including Saudi Arabia. We also have long been clear that premature actions here in New York, even with the best intentions, will not achieve statehood for the Palestinian people. As members of the Security Council, we have a special responsibility to ensure that our actions further the cause of international peace and security and are consistent with the requirements of the UN Charter. As reflected in the report of the Admission Committee, there was not unanimity among committee members as to whether the applicant met the criteria for membership as set forth in Article 4 of the UN Charter. For example, there are unresolved questions as to whether the applicant meets the criteria to be considered a state. We have long called on the Palestinian Authority to undertake necessary reforms to help establish the attributes of readiness for statehood, and note that Hamas, a terrorist organization, is currently exerting power and influence in Gaza, an integral part of the state envisioned in this resolution. For these reasons, the United States voted no on this Security Council resolution. Again, the United States continues to strongly support a two-state solution. This vote does not reflect opposition to Palestinian statehood, but instead is an acknowledgement that it will only come from direct negotiations between the parties. A central focus of U.S. policy prior to October 7, the October 7 Hamas terrorist attacks, was to promote normalization between Israel and its Arab neighbors and, as a critical element of a normalization package, generate tangible benefits and a political horizon for the Palestinian people. This was based on the U.S. judgment that normalization is the most viable pathway to make progress on what had been an intractable situation between the Israelis and the Palestinians. In the aftermath of October 7, conversations on potential normalization and a political horizon for the Palestinians that would lead to statehood and membership at the UN have continued. Hamas and its Iranian backers would probably prefer this effort not succeed, but we are determined to see it through. It remains the U.S. view that the most expeditious path towards statehood for the Palestinian people is through direct negotiations between Israel and the Palestinian Authority with the support of the United States and other partners. We believe this approach can tangibly advance Palestinian goals in a meaningful and enduring way. We also believe, in light of Iran's unprecedented and outrageous actions over the last week, that Israel's neighbors would stand to benefit greatly from normalization. The United States is committed to intensifying its engagement with the Palestinians and the rest of the region, not only to address the current crisis in Gaza, but to advance a political settlement that will create a path to Palestinian statehood and membership in the United Nations. the United States will continue to oppose unilateral measures that undermine the prospect of a two-state solution. This includes any actions that violate the principles that Secretary Blinken has emphasized for months, that Gaza cannot be a platform for terrorism. There should be no Israeli reoccupation of Gaza, and the size of Gaza's territory should not be reduced. As we have said before, we believe a two-state solution coupled with these elements is the best way to achieve a durable peace in the region, along with security for Israelis and Palestinians. Thank you, Madam President.
I thank the representative of the United States and pass the floor to the representative of France.